So you guys have been watching the channel for a while now, and you know that we are huge fans of the Eastman E10D. In fact, we've been recommending it for quite a long time. But now you're running around our site and you see that there's a Recording King guitar, the RD-318, with very similar specs, but for almost half the price. And you're probably wondering, are all imported guitars created equal?
And another holds the one that I love so.
So why don't you introduce us a little bit more to this guitar you're holding?
Yeah, this is the Recording King RD-318. It is a very popular option on the interwebs of the world. In fact, we see this one compared a lot with Blue Ridge guitars. Also, like you said, comparing it to Eastman and what they've been putting out. All of them have been putting out value branded import guitars that are kind of after that Martin sound. All three companies have been doing it for a little while now, and they all have different approaches to it. The Recording King is more of what I consider a mass-produced product, where it is the same overall spec, just being built in one factory where they just kind of keep it going and not hand voicing and working on them. Now, they did do some things. Both Blue Ridge and Recording King did kind of redo the import build, the mass-produced import build, in that they were much more particular about how they were built. They went into these factories and kind of said, this is how we want you to scrape the bindings. If you run out of a material, do not replace it with a secondary option, which happens a lot in a lot of the mass-produced guitar builds. So they did kind of step it up. And we saw that when Blue Ridge first came out and Recording King came out, we were kind of like, man, there's a lot of guitar there for its value.
Yeah. So why did we decide that we wanted to carry this guitar in the Acoustic shop?
Well, I think there's two different reasons. One, it does come in at under half the price of what an E10D does. Now, again, to be fair, there are instruments from Eastman that are similar in spec, not quite the same, for closer to the same price. But it does kind of hit that mark a little bit, just differently. But we wanted to bring in Recording King because of the fact that it was such a popular guitar, and we want people
requests for it.
Yeah, tons of requests. Everybody wanted to see how does it compare, and there are buyers that do prefer this. Guys, I hate to tell you all this, but not everybody agrees with me on what I like out of a guitar. Jeremy, you don't even like what I like out of a guitar.
I don't even watching this channel now.
Anyway, so there are some alternatives, but we want to be able to, talk freely and be fair when we do give comparisons to instruments that we don't find to be quite the same character as the stuff that we really heavily recommend. It's kind of disingenuous if we don't actually have this. All right, so let's get into the specs of these two guitars since we are comparing them. They are very similar specs, but we'll go over the differences. Jeremy is holding an Eastman E10D-TC. I am holding a Recording King RD-318. The RD-318 comes in at $649, whereas the E10D-TC is now $1,559. The body size, obviously, both the same in a Dreadnought. Tone woods. This one has an Adirondack spruce top, as does that one. But this one they're claiming to be a 30-year-old Adirondack spruce top. So this is something that has been sat around and aged, whereas that one's a thermo-cured Adirondack spruce top or torrefied. And again, if you follow the channel, you know what that's all about. Definitely gives it a more aged sound. So I guess there's some comparisons to be there. Two different approaches to try to get an aged Adirondack.
One you got to wait a lot longer for.
Sound, yeah. Back and sides on these are both mahogany, where the neck is also mahogany. So again, tie on both of these. Head plate on this one is going to be a rosewood one, where that one should be an ebony head plate on the E10D. Tortoise binding on both of these guitars, which is a little bit different. They're different colored tortoise binding too, and I think there's a little bit more slightly different wood purfling that is on the Eastman there for you. This one will have a rosewood bridge, which is really kind of interesting because it looks like it's a stained rosewood as well as a rosewood fretboard. The E10D will have ebony for the bridge and fretboard. Nut width on this, the Recording King will be 1 11/16 versus 1 3/4 on there. They both do have adjustable truss rods, bone nut and saddle. This one will have Grover Butterbean tuners. They will have the Pingwell or Goto tuners, depending on which batch you kind of got. Both have that same open gear style tuner. Sitka Spruce bracing on the Recording King that is forward shifted X brace. That is not truly a forward shifted X brace, but it is Sitka Spruce braced as well, and has been scalloped from the factory and hand voiced by doing so. They both have a gloss finish. This one does have that kind of characteristic mass-produced import,
Very thick.
heavy, thick one. You'll see on the joints here a more almost like it was kind of dipped style finish, where that one will have the True Tone finish, which is the same finish that they use on all bourgeois guitars. Well, most bourgeois guitars. As for the necks, this one does have again a fully glossed neck, which I'm actually a big fan of. That one does have the satin finish, which is actually what most of you as players tend to prefer. This is just their variance difference here. The Recording King will have no case, where that one will have a deluxe hard shell case coming with it.
Just looking at the back of that, the neck looks like it's got more of a V to it than the...
As far as shape, it is a much different profile. This has a extremely exaggerated V shape. This has a definite point to it, and some people will like it, others will definitely hate it. It is a extremely pronounced V shape, where that one is more of a standard C, although I've been told they're kind of leaning into a little bit more of a V profile. We'll be seeing how that kind of plays out in the next few years. All right, guys, so let's give a rating. This was going to be a little bit unique. Normally we do a 1 to 5 scale. This one's going to be, and it's usually based on like price points. We already established that these are half, so I do want to compare it a little bit more to that. We're just going to rate this particular guitar because we have put that guitar through its paces. We've given it a rating. You guys know how that one stacks up. So we'll talk about this guitar right here, and we'll start with the tone of this guitar. Now, when I compare it to, some of the guitars in the past, which were, quote, entry-level import guitars, this does stack up pretty well. But there's some depth to it, and it does have resonance, but it's almost like it's a short-lived, plunky version of more openness and resonance. It's not a true, there's response, but it's almost like it's being put a pillow in it.
It's like the wood is doing its job despite the build. Like the
with you.
bracing and stuff is what's stopping it, but having good tone woods is making it above average.
Like you said, there's like a response to it, but it's almost like something just sucked it back and just like, no, you're not allowed to let loose of that. So in all honesty here, for me on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to give this one a 3.5. 3.5.
Yeah, I think, and again, we're trying to,
Tone-wise.
in like tone, we played some Eastmans in that price range. If you're going in that price range, this one is lacking some on that. It almost has a toy quality to it, where it's not got that really good response that you're looking for out of a guitar. I'm going to give it about a 3 from my personal perspective.
All right, so it's already doing great so far. Setup and playability. This one actually is set up pretty darn low. In fact, for me, it's a little bit too low.
But for that market of who's wanting to play the guitar,
it's definitely playable. I know that we actually had to go through it and do some basic fret work to kind of clean it up a little bit. There was some definitely unevenness in here. So out of the box, before we kind of worked on this guitar, again, it was okay. It just wasn't great. I'm going to give it a 3.9. I'm almost going to give it a 4-star.
you stepped it up, but I'm going to give it about a 3.6. So it's just above that kind of average setup. It's not really bad. We didn't have to do a lot of work on it, but it would need some work, I think, to get it where you want it.
I agree with that. All right, so let's talk about the build quality. This thing is definitely heavy finished. It's a little bit not so clean. We were discussing earlier, there's a line here where you can tell they taped over the edge of the fretboard and they just sprayed it and then they pulled the tape so you could just see the finish that goes to a certain line and then quits. And then you had the build-up finish that goes all the way through there. Definitely stained in the the bridge. In fact, so much so that it actually went onto the saddle itself, and you can see where it discolored the saddle from that.
It's unfortunate. It seems like some of the stereotypes that we've had to come over on Eastman is because of some of the build quality they've seen in some of these imports where it's not a lot of care put into, it's a mass-produced instrument. And it's just kind of, let's get these out of the factory as quickly as we can. And that's kind of what you're seeing in this guitar. That's why it seems like a little bit of an unfair comparison with the Eastman, because they took a different approach with it, much more of a luthier and master luthier
It's hard
build.
it's hard to divide that from the bourgeois and the Bedels and all the higher quality as far as its build quality. So
what's your point for general build quality?
build quality, guys? I gotta give it. I hate to do it. 3.2. I'm gonna not go all the way to the 3. I almost did.
Yeah,
I give it a 3.2.
I'm right there too. It's not bad. It's better than like a Fender and some of those really, really inexpensive acoustics, but it's not the same level. So
You just made all the Fender acoustic guys mad.
Are there Fender acoustic guys? Acoustic Sonic maybe. No, I think build quality. I'm going to go with a 3.25.
Boy, we are
just
never
lost
going
our
to ever
Fender
be a Fender dealer ever.
Like that wasn't going to be the truth. In mind.
Okay, we'll get into the looks, the aesthetics of this guitar. I have a problem with the Gumby headstock. I don't know why. It's not my
You're a
favorite.
headstock guy. It
But
bothers you.
I also don't much care for the
V-neck's a little
V-shaped
strange.
neck and the overdone
I do like the
finish.
appearance of the mahogany on those. Eastman's mahogany looks different. Like it's got just a different color to it. I know a lot of that's staining. Like it's stained to that more traditional looking mahogany.
Yep.
So appearance-wise, it looks all right.
Yeah, it's
It's an attractive guitar.
Good. It's you know what? I'm not going to give it as harsh a run here. I'm going to give it a 4. I actually going to get all the way to 4 stars.
I think if I saw that, and I'm looking on the screen up here, in a crowd of other guitar players or in a jam session, it looks like a good-looking Dreadnought guitar. So I'm going to get about a 4.2.
As far as shop sustainable, I'm pretty certain this one does not fall in our shop sustainable mission. It can't for its price point. There's not a whole lot of options for them to be able to get to that.
Yeah.
Overall value, guys. I think these are good guitars at that price. I know we were comparing it to that. At a $600 price point. Are there other ones that I would compare and maybe encourage? Yeah, I think there are. So again, for that, I'm going to give this a 3.7 for me on overall value. I think it's a good guitar. It's just not quite hitting the marks.
It's really priced about where it should be. I don't think it's overpriced for what you're getting. I do think there are other options that make it more feasible to go a different direction where you could get more guitar. But again, if you're wanting the full gloss finish, and did you say this one comes with a hard shell case?
Does not come with a case. So,
Okay,
yeah,
so there's some value lost there too.
There.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to do a 3.5 on that because it's right. It's priced about where it should be. A nice case would be good to have on top of that. It's an option.
Yeah.
So I guess we go to who would this guitar be for, John? If we didn't rate this as high as we do other ones that we carry in the shop, why do we have this? Who would be the right buyer for this guitar?
To be honest with you, this is one of those highly recommended instrument brands. When you search for first guitar, this is definitely one of them. The Blue Ridges, looking for a first bluegrass guitar, that is probably the person who's looking at this. And again, I think compared to a lot of the options that you will see in those generic lists from all over the internet, from players who may or may not have as much access to some of the higher end instruments that are coming in at budget prices, I think this is going to show up on your radar quite often and is not a horrible choice. The downside is, like what we just said, there are better options out there. So the downsides for me on this particular instrument, the biggest one I think is going to be this neck. I've been around players long enough to know that a V shape that is such drastic variation as this it's a deal breaker for a lot of people. This is not one of those ones where you're just like, I can't stand it now. Maybe I'll get used to it. If you don't like it, you're not going to like this. It's just all there is to it. Now, again, there are people who loves a V shape and it fits their hand. It gives you more mass front to back. with less of the meat in the middle area, so it feels smaller in your hand. But again, if I'm doing bar chords and stuff, now I've got this center piece that's just coming right at me where it doesn't break over a span of there. So there's one of my biggest one. Again, we keep bringing it up, but the heavy run finish.
Yeah, I was going to say my biggest
stifling.
downside would be, and it has been with most import instruments, it almost looks like they dipped the instrument into a plastic finish, and it's so thick that you can see a reflection on the top of it, how far away from the wood it is. And another thing I really despise is finishing over the neck joint. I mean, almost always that ends up splitting right there along the neck joint and around the
also makes it
fretboard.
almost impossible to do a neck reset on. Now, there are some Eastmans that do this, so don't get us wrong. It is a much more inexpensive version. It is not going to be at the level of the E10 or the E6, but definitely in their PCH line, you'll see more of those kind of deals. It's much easier. It's much cheaper. Yeah. So there you go. All right, guys, so I think it's time we actually put these things back to back so you can hear them for yourself. We're going to do tone samples of both of these guitars so you can see what you like and which one turns out best for you.
You mentioned when we were at the NAMM Show 2024, you went around the show and played every acoustic guitar we could put our hands on, and some that you weren't even allowed to put your hands on, you played them.
I did.
And including the Recording King and the Blue Ridge guitars. If you guys would like to see that and all the guitars and how we rated them, check out this video. It was a lot of fun. I think you'll really enjoy it.